the world famous actor Arnold Schwarzenegger, who later became governor of California. Together they have 4 children, Catherine, Christina, Patrick, and Christopher. They divorced in 2021. Maria is an Emmy and Peabody Award-winning journalist and former national news anchor. She served 4 years as First Lady of California. She's the creator of the award-winning digital publication, The Sunday Paper, which I love to read every week. Maria is the best-selling author of many books and one of the world's leading advocates for women's health and Alzheimer's research. And now she is a loving and doting grandmother to her daughter Catherine's children with actor Chris Pratt, Lila, Eloise, and Ford. In this book, you've literally opened your soul and allowed all of us who have any feelings of loss or grief or not being enough or not being able to show up for ourselves, you have led us to the open field. And bless you for that. And I am so proud of you for that. And it's all in the form of poems. And you go places I thought you would never go. I want to say I really, really, really am just honored that you have become and evolved into the woman that you are. And I'm so honored.
Let's take it.
For us, it was important. Our duty is to take Syria away from all these reprehensible practices, to lead it towards something better, qui va à quelque chose de mieux.
The Syrian president did not hesitate to accept the invitation.
From Bashar al-Assad's point of view, this is absolutely crucial, because he needs a kind of international recognition which France is offering him. La France, Bashar al-Assad is a nation. It's just to live and be perceived to be welcome by all the people of the state and government for the ship to carry that policy. Then it might make sense to put a piece of that building into the physical golden show. You can take it over like this guy and then like this. But I'm not talking about getting a tiny piece of home and doing it. That's the golden roof. I'm talking about a physical golden show inside of your home. That means that you have to do it in the building and hire many other types of house. You can now take a piece of that building and use it to provide physical golden show. Other side of your home, you can remove heavily guarded frequencies in the United States. But go ahead, because when you think of that, you're going to see them, all of these things are very good. How it works, won't come out like it. But you're going to have to altogether, that gives you everything you need to get started. Plus, that special $10,000 bonus offer, I think you'll find interesting. Before your money turns from this into this, click the link below.
Steam a whole lot more than just whole milk. With plant-based milk run. It's the Espresso Collection by KitchenAid.
Less than a month later, in this small Tunisian village, an angry crowd accompanied the coffin of Mohamed Bouazizi. The young ambulance salesman had set himself alight in protest against police harassment. The demonstration marked the start of a revolt that would sweep through the authoritarian regimes of the Arab world.
People demanded more economic freedom, less corruption, and more democratic freedom.
Plus de liberté démocratique.
This was the beginning of the Arab Spring, which reached Syria in March. The protest began in Dera, a town in the southwest of the country.
Within minutes, 100 or so young people had gathered. Generally speaking, it was very easy for the security forces to disperse the Syrians. All they had to do was intimidate them with insults. But this time it was different. The young people were no longer afraid. We, the older generation, were hesitant. We were afraid because we were well aware of the cruelty of this regime. But the young people, with their enthusiasm, advanced towards the security forces.
In the days that followed, the mobilization intensified and began to spread to other towns in the country. Bashar al-Assad, so benevolent and conciliatory during his visit to Paris, was to reveal a completely different side of his personality. To counter the revolt, he opted for total repression.
At the time, I repeated many times that a military solution would only lead to destruction. But this was not the opinion of the security chiefs, quite the contrary. They advised him to arrest people and kill them.
On March 30th, Bashar al-Assad threatened his opponents live on television from the Syrian parliament.
والمؤامرة كبيرة ونحن لا نسعى لمعارك. الشعب السوري شعب مسالم وودود، ولكننا لم نتردد يوم الدفاع عن قضايانا ومصالحنا ومبادئنا. وإذا فرضت علينا المعركة اليوم فأهلا وسهلا بها. خطايانا والمؤامرة كبيرة ونحن لا نسعى لمعارك. الشعب السوري شعب مسالم وودود، ولكننا لم نتردد يوما في الدفاع عن قضايانا ومصالحنا ومبادئنا. وإذا فرضت علينا المعركة اليوم فأهلا وسهلا بها.
Talk of stiffening up and closing down made no sense. Pas de sens. Donc, so I think there was pressure on the power environment to make him change his mind, qui se sont exercés pour le faire changer d'avis.
This was the beginning of a descent into hell for the Syrian nation. In the space of a few months, the dead numbered in the thousands.
This is a power that has historically been repressive. So they're going to use once again the weapon they think they've mastered, repression and violence. And indeed, for the first 4 to 5 months, they bloodily repressed demonstrations that were for the most part pacifist, pas pacifiste.
But despite this violence, the demonstrations continued unabated. One young author even dared to write an anti-Bachar hymn, a protest song taken up in chorus throughout the country. Don't you be. A few days later, the author of the text was found murdered et retrouvé assassiné. The young singer had been tortured and his vocal cords torn out. An unbearable image. What does the Syrian regime want? To make people understand that it has no limits to atrocity when its power is challenged.
We were surprised to see Bashar al-Assad with a face we didn't know. We were surprised to see him capable of getting people killed.
This is the story of a man with two faces. On the one hand, the timid Dr. Bashar, who initially seduced the West with his promises of openness. On the other, the terrible Mr. El-Assad, a dictator accused of massacring part of his own people over the past 7 years. The result is a war unfolding before our very eyes, with hundreds of thousands of victims. This is also one of the first keys that may shed light on Bashar al-Assad's psychology. Up until the age of 30, he never dreamed of entering politics, let alone becoming president. On the contrary, he did everything to escape the political intrigues of the Syrian dictatorship founded by his father. In 1993, he was a long way from Damascus. He was a doctor in the heart of Europe, in London. Bashar al-Assad has been living here for 6 months. He is finishing his medical studies. He is 29 years old and is an ophthalmology intern at a well-known clinic.
He had basic medical training, but no experience of eye surgery. He had to be trained in everything. So at first he did basic procedures like eyelid care and other simple tasks. He was a very good student because he was very disciplined and focused on his work. He gave the impression that he loved what he was doing and that he was going to succeed. He had a very good relationship with the patients. He always communicated with them in an extremely sensitive way. Everybody liked him, including the nurses, and he was very respectful with all levels of staff.
I want to buy your house. I can pay you cash for your house no matter what condition it's in. If you need to sell your house for any reason, click the button under this video to see if my offer is right for you. We make the process of selling your house easy and simple. No commissions, no fees. We'll buy your house in as-is condition, and you pick the closing date. No appraisals, no repairs, no hassles. All offers are completely confident, and there is no obligation whatsoever. Click the button below this video and fill out a short survey so we can move you a cash offer today. If you're struggling to sell your house, this is the fastest and easiest way to get money in your pocket ASAP. Yes, we will really buy your house and it's efficient. We love your house. Click the link now to see how much cash you can get for your house today. Best case scenario, you'll get rid of a huge pain in record time with a nice chunk of change in your pocket. What do you have to lose?
Step inside an Infiniti QX55 and experience another side of yourself. From a driver-focused premium interior to tech at your fingertips and a sound system made just for your playlist. Experience a side of luxury that lets you feel infinitely you. With Infiniti Premium Care included, feel infinitely you in the 2024 QX55, only at your Infiniti retailer.
Concentrating on his studies, Bashar el-Assad leads a discreet life between the clinic and the small apartment he occupies in an upmarket part of London. He seems to do everything in his power to make people forget that he is the son of one of the most feared men on the planet. Hafez el-Assad, the dictator who has ruled Syria with an iron fist for over 20 years. Let's go back in time. The year is 1973. Hafez el-Assad had seized power in a military coup 2 years earlier. On that day, in the old town of Damascus, he was acclaimed by a crowd under the orders of the security service.
وأسس جمهورية أسدية.
He had founded a regime under his complete control. No one dared say that at the time because the mere mention of the idea would have landed us in prison for 20 years.
هذا التفسير الذي يقوله لك الآن ببساطة. حقيقة
We were afraid, even I, who was close to him.
نتحدث في السياسة.
When people talked politics or mentioned Hafez el-Assad's name, he lowered his voice. Il baissait la voix.
يخفض صوته.
The dictator imposed himself through fear because he comes from a Muslim community that is very much in the minority in his country, the Alawites. A mountain people dominated for centuries by Sunnis, the majority branch of Islam, who make up 70% of the Syrian population.
The Alawites are a sect with a very low level of religious practice. When you walk through the streets of Latakia in Alawite country, you see young girls in miniskirts, no veils, and so on. So these are people who are very secular, therefore quickly became opposed to Sunni gods.
To run the country, Hafez el-Assad functioned as a clan leader. He placed Alawites in key positions in the regime, as well as members of his own family. Hafez has 5 children, and is counting on his eldest son Basil to succeed him. Basil reprend sa succession.
Basil has been trained by his father since childhood. That was his plan for the presidency. He had to excel in every field, shooting, swimming, parachuting, and administration. It has to be said that Basil's personality was much stronger than Bashar's.
On the right in the photo is Bachar, the second son in his family. Nothing predestined him to succeed his father one day. Pour la succession de son père.
Bachar is a very special boy. He's not very good at school, even though he's a hard worker. He's not very sure of himself. He's a total introvert. To put it more simply, he's very shy.
Bashar al-Assad feels a little isolated in the family. He's a little unloved because he's overwhelmed by the personality of his sister, his older sister Bushra, who's a strong woman. And he's also crushed by his older brother Basil, who's a sanguine, fiery type. Et fougueux.
At the age of 16, Bashar, a high school student, still has nothing in common with a future leader. He shows little interest in politics and devotes himself to his studies. But unable to escape the violence already bloody in his country.
A car bomb exploded in front of the military police building. Dozens were killed.
Since the late 70s, his father's regime has been shaken by a wave of attacks. The Islamic Muslim Brotherhood criticizes his secular authoritarian regime, or regime built there. Assad has faced several assassination attempts and will respond to this threat with bloodshed. In 1982, when the Muslim Brothers tried to organize an armed insurrection in the city of Hama, Hafez al-Assad chose the most radical solution. He sent his troops to raise the town to the ground. The death toll was between 20 and 30,000, most of them civilians.
The Muslim Brothers were put to the sword by the elite Republican Guard, led by Hafez al-Assad's brother, Bashar's uncle Rifat al-Assad. No, Bashar hated it. They decided at the time that they had to clean out this pocket of resistance, so they didn't go into any detail on the issue. It was a massacre.
The repression was very violent and the hunt for suspects began. A law was promulgated that provided for the death penalty for anyone suspected of belonging to the Muslim Brotherhood.
And here she are.
All you had to do was denounce someone and he or she would be arrested. Tens of thousands of young people with patriotic or progressive leanings were thrown into prison alongside radical Islamist militants. Aux côtés des militants du courant islamiste radical. Criticism and organization were forbidden.
Thank you all for joining the Oprah Podcast and for watching us on YouTube. I appreciate you taking the time to spend it here with me, and I'm just so appreciative of the conversations we're having.
In 1984, when much of the country was living in terror, Bashar began his medical studies at Damascus University.
He wants to go for
He aspired to a quiet life. He chose ophthalmology, a specialty in which there are no emergencies except in exceptional cases. He can sleep at home, take vacations, and live in found a solution by studying abroad.
Pour poursuivre ses études à l'étranger.
At the age of 28, Bashar al-Assad began a new life in London. A resident in ophthalmology, the withdrawn young man seems at last to be blossoming.
He said, I've never been happier than in London. And if you look at him, he's in London, he can be himself and no one blames him. Except for
It was also in London that he met the woman of his life in the city. Though at an evening party for expatriates from the Syrian upper middle class, he falls under the spell of an 18-year-old girl, Asma.
Yeah, there's a girl in the house called Asma al-Akras at the time, who appeals to him greatly. He begins his courtship. And that's how, against the backdrop of complete shyness, he met the girl who was to become his wife.
But Bashar al-Assad didn't have time to make a life for himself in London, nor to finish his medical studies. On January 21st, 1994, he received a phone call from Damascus. His elder brother Basil had just been killed in a road accident on la route. The regime had just lost its heir, and Bashar was next in line.
He came to see me that morning. He told me that unfortunately he wouldn't be able to continue the course because he had to return to Syria after the unfortunate death of his brother in a car accident. He showed no emotion.
If that is what you want to know.
He was simply rather mysterious in the way he talked about it.
This is Bashar's intimate tragedy. He's gone from being an ophthalmologist in the making to a dictator in the making. À devenir au stade de dictateur en devenir.
The meniscus in your knee. It's this cartilage cushion that's right here, and it makes the difference between a healthy, painless knee joint and one that is bone on bone. And tragically, there are over 1.5 million knee surgeries that are performed every year in the United States. And hundreds of thousands of those surgical procedures are unnecessary and avoidable. So, if you have knee pain, especially if it interferes with your quality of life, you really should watch the video. I reveal a 30-second fix that over 200,000 Americans are now using to grease their joints and relieve their pain. This is a surprising solution, and it is not hyaluronic acid or glucosamine, and it's certainly not about acupuncture or physical therapy. It's not like any of the mainstream or even the alternative solutions that you've heard about before. And it completely flies in the face of what the big profit pain relief industry wants you to believe. I want to read you a couple of notes that were sent to me recently. So Marilyn B, she said, "This saved me from pending knee replacement surgery, and I tell everyone I meet to save them from this trauma." So far, I personally know of over 30 people that have listened and loved this simple and extremely effective answer to ongoing nagging pain. I am totally pain-free, she said, and loving life. Plus, back to ice skating at almost 88. And then Margie S, she sent me this. "This has me walking so much easier. My pain level has gone from a 9 to a very manageable 2. Thank you." So please put your phone on Do Not Disturb, turn off your TV if it's on, and pay close attention to this breaking news that can soon get you out of pain and back to doing the things you need to do, just like Hello, my name is Dr. Joshua Levy. I'm a board-certified naturopathic physician, and I own one of the most respected holistic medicine practices in New England. This is
The following day, Basil el-Assad was laid to rest on the land of his family clan in the Alawite Mountains. His His father, Hafez, had wanted a funeral worthy of a head of state. Basil's funeral was a huge event. I can assure you that millions of Syrians tried to reach Karda where he was buried. The family and their propaganda had presented Basil as the man who would bring modernization. Everyone cried, and it was sincere because people loved him. Alongside his father, Bashar al-Assad made his first public appearance that day. The Syrian people did not know him, yet he was now the new heir to power, le nouvel héritier du pouvoir. It was a shock for him. He was completely destabilized. He couldn't come to his senses.
I could never have imagined living through such a tragedy as you, my brother Basil, have left us. You were dedicated to your work and loyal to your country. I imagine you leaving on horseback, as if carried by a wave on the open sea.
In a few hours?
In the space of a few hours, he had become the center of attention. He was going to have to become the boss. For him, it was too overwhelming. He couldn't take it. Especially as he would soon have to put on his new suit as future president. For his father, time was running out. Hafez al-Assad was suffering from cancer, and he needed to impose his new successor as quickly as possible.
His father immediately told him, you have to learn such and such a file and come and work with me.
Hafez al-Assad feared the collapse of the state he had built himself. I could feel that he didn't see in Bashar what he saw in Basel. But what could he do? He had to prepare.
The Silverado Trail Boss. And a little work. And a little play. And a truck that says no to nothing. And Chevrolet. Together, let's drive.
Best and worst cooking oil. Number 2, coconut oil. Coconut oil is very high smoke. So, yes, you can absolutely use it. Unfortunately, coconut oil has only about a tenth of the polyphenols of olive oil. So, believe it or not, the best oil for cooking is olive oil. Olive oil is going to give you the polyphenols. Polyphenols are plant compounds that are incredibly healthy for your body. If you consume a diet high in polyphenols, it can actually help you burn unwanted fat too. But not all olive oils are created equal. Certain olive oils contain massive doses of these fat-fighting polyphenols, which is why I personally take a shot of high-quality olive oil every single day. Have some olive oil before your bed, and your sleeping partner will love you for it.
Somebody told me olive oil produces shaving cream.
Shaving cream? Yep. Swap out that spray can and slather on some olive oil instead. It can actually be really useful for moisturizing your skin and helping it look bright and fresh.
Someone commented, does olive oil actually prevent snoring?
Snoring? Fact. It turns out that olive oil lubricates your respiratory passages so that vibration doesn't happen.
Can it help with my teeth?
Whiter looking teeth? Yes.
And then Bashar got stuck. Bashar's first circle, his family circle, said that for the first time in his life, Bashar had said no to his father.
But Hafez al-Assad left him no choice. He had to quickly convince the regime's top dignitaries of the legitimacy of his new heir. And Bashar is far from having the ideal profile.
A lot of top officials, they look at him as a young
Many officials saw him as an unqualified, spoiled young man who had not been educated for this high office. Qui n'avait pas été éduqué pour cette haute fonction.
high position.
And unfamiliar with the complexities of Syrian political life.
At first, they didn't take him seriously.
Directly, his father ordered
His father immediately took the decision to have him redo his military service to be accepted by the party tenors and major generals.
high generals.
A week after leaving London and giving up his career as a doctor, Bashar al-Assad found himself in uniform at a military academy for accelerated training. There, pour une formation accélérée.
The military training was to make him look like a worthy successor to his father, who was a true military man.
He climbs the ranks at a remarkable speed. The important thing was that he could claim to have stripes on his shoulder.
In November 1994, Bashar al-Assad was promoted to the rank of captain at a ceremony widely covered by the Syrian media.
Par les médias syriens.
Less than a year after his return from London, he appeared metamorphosed.
Métamorphosé.
The discreet medical student seems to have accepted his presidential destiny. But even his closest friends don't recognize him.
You start notice.
We began to notice his new personality.
Cover his mouth again.
He never covered his mouth when he spoke.
Stand.
He never slouched or relaxed again.
Easy way or relaxed way.
He stood straight as a sword. When he spoke to you, he looked you straight in the eye and right in the eye, au fond des yeux.
Deep.
Now you knew you were in front of an official figure, yet he was soon to occupy the highest office.
Bientôt les plus hautes fonctions.
High positions.
Having earned his military stripes, Bashar al-Assad will now have to learn the subtleties of Syrian power.
He wasn't qualified at the beginning.
At first he wasn't qualified for the job. The job of president of Syria is a very complex one. We have 19 sects and religious groups. It's very difficult to run this country.
To do so, he will need to control the various components of the regime as his father did.
Opposant du régime.
We're talking about 15 intelligence services. The Air Force Intelligence Service is the most powerful. The Military Intelligence Service responsible for controlling the Army, the General Security Service. Hafez al-Assad has the ingenuity to place at the head of these services people who sometimes don't like each other. So they spend their time spying on each other. So by doing this, he's not thinking about overthrowing.
He was always in a fight.
He was constantly fighting against time to acquire more knowledge, perfect his networks and keep up with the times.
The deal was.
The deal was, you reached the level to earn your father's respect and become president.
Et devenir président.
He wasn't going to risk seeing the line die out with him. And he'd only hand over power if he was really ready and did what was necessary to be ready.
Nécessaire pour l'être.
He needs.
The nerve affected by neuropathy won't ever be a problem again if you take this vitamin in the morning. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here to talk.
A year later, a media campaign was launched to sell Bashar al-Assad to the Syrian people.
Le peuple syrien est mis en place.
In the newspapers, he is presented as a reformer.
Réformateur.
The propaganda began and they pointed to Bashar as
Bashar comme étant l'espoir.
The communication campaign was based on two pillars, modernization and anti-corruption.
The aim was not to impose Bashar al-Assad by force, but to make him the ideal candidate. So, to maintain the illusion of democracy, Hafez al-Assad never officially presented his son as his successor.
Comme son successeur.
No, I'm not preparing it.
I'm not preparing my son to succeed. He never mentioned it. لا الأصلا يعني نحن بقوانيننا بدستورنا ما في شيء، لا يوجد هناك grant the right of inheritance by descent. We have none of that. خلافي ما في عندنا.
Of course he knows he'll put Bashar in his place, but the Syrians count, the Syrian people count. In a way, he's worshipping him, but he's worshipping intelligently by letting the Syrians believe that they still have the choice of not worshipping him, which is obviously not the case.
In 1999, Hafez al-Assad was very weakened by illness. But before he could install his son in power, he had to make him known on the international scene. For this, Hafez turned to France. The two countries shared a long history. For 25 years, Syria was a French protectorate before gaining independence in 1946.
Among the major Western and developed countries, France is the only one with a historical relationship with Syria.
The relationship with Syria is an important one, quite simply because Syria is a key to the Middle East as a whole. And it's naturally a country where you have to be.
That day, Hafez al-Assad met President Jacques Chirac and asked him to sponsor his son.
As Jacques Chirac confessed in his memoirs, he said, Hafez al-Assad said to me, you must consider Bashar as your son. So take him under your wing and make him a president worthy of succeeding me.
Jacques Chirac immediately understood the advantage of saying to Hafez al-Assad, you're sick, I'll take care of your son, and open the door to Western diplomacy for him.
In November 1999, Jacques Chirac received Bashar al-Assad at the Élysée Palace. A powerful symbol, it established him in the eyes of the world as the undisputed heir to Syrian power.
We also know that his father entrusted him with projects involving French companies. Alcatel will win a contract to secure communications for the presidential guard. I expressed my point of view to President Chirac. He has always shown understanding for the rights of the Arab people in general and the Syrian people in particular.
At the age of 34, Bashar al-Assad now embodies the hope of a liberalization of the Syrian regime. President Chirac is seduced.
Jacques Chirac finds him quite modern, quite open. So there's a kind of theory that's starting to spread at the time that it's going to be more modern. More modern how we don't really know.
Even the specialist journalists who interviewed him during his stay were charmed. While his father inspired fear, Bashar al-Assad seems more open.
He has a friendly, approachable manner. Sympathique. And we can talk, we can ask in-depth questions. He tries to answer them, and you can disagree with him, interrupt him and all that, which wasn't always the case with the father. You couldn't interrupt the father. There's a kind of friendliness about Bashar al-Assad. Bashar al-Assad, you think, well, the guy looks like a nice young fellow after all. If he's the successor, why not? Si c'est celui qui succède, pourquoi pas?
6 months later, Hafez al-Assad passed away at the age of 69. Immediately, his inner circle moved to protect his heir. This power vacuum could lead to a coup d'etat. Bashar al-Assad is still not unanimously supported by the clan.
He's in a weak position because his father, the Reyes, has just died. He hasn't yet taken command. They're afraid he'll be killed. Il demande, il veut pas qu'il se fasse tuer.
When I see a tag that says 100% wool, I rarely think about what goes into creating.
He's sheltered. He's overprotected on this one. Surprotégé sur ce coup. They put him in a bunker, and he's not allowed to move. All the generals and what we call the first circle. In other words, the people closest to him will effectively lock all Syrian doors. Toutes les portes syriennes. The army, intelligence, all the keys to the regime must be locked, verrouillées, tenues.
From now on, the Syrian president's funeral will serve to promote his heir. Not only portraits of the deceased could be seen in the processions. The figure of Bashar al-Assad was also brandished in the foreground. Even Jacques Chirac played along with this skillfully orchestrated transfer of power. He was the only Western head of state to attend the ceremony.
He's not going there to pay tribute to Hafez al-Assad, but to endorse the young, inexperienced President Bashar al-Assad.
This was Jacques Chirac's general staff. Chaleureux, warm, demonstrative, quite tactile, and even affectionate with the young, quote-unquote, Bashar al-Assad. He shared a kind of hope that many Syrians did, in fact, look further. Their feeling was perhaps one of promising change for the country.
In July 2000, a single candidate for the presidency, Bashar al-Assad, was elected head of state by the Syrian parliament, which took orders from the regime. He inherited a dictatorial power with which he was very familiar. His father also bequeathed him an entourage of trusted men who control the country's single party, army, and intelligence services. The succession plan devised by Hafez al-Assad calls for Bashar to modernize Syria to guarantee the survival of the dictatorship and the clan's control. He must retain the support of his people. The young president had a roadmap, but he was soon overtaken by events. That day, Bashar al-Assad was due to make his first major speech as head of state before parliament. En tant que chef de l'État. The deputies appointed by the regime are all his supporters. It was they who had nominated him as the sole candidate for the presidency.
السيد رئيس مجلس الشعب، السيدات والسادة أعضاء المجلس.
For over an hour, the new president outlined his plans for the future. And some of the phrases sounded like a thunderclap.
First, we need to come up with new ideas in all areas. أفكار جديدة في المجالات كافة.
He sends out the message that he is the president of reform, the first of all.
Some are calling for a transparent economy, others for transparent media. There's no doubt about it. Their demands are very important, and I agree with them.
In this first speech, he also talks about corruption. He explains that he is going to fight corruption. At that point, he really sparked real hope among Syrians.
We must put an end to the state of laxity, indifference, and dereliction of duty, and we must fight the corrupt. The man who became president will always remain the same. The doctor, the officer, and above all, the citizen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
At the time, many Syrians believed in the possibility of reform. They certainly didn't hope to leap in one fell swoop to a Western-style liberal society, but at least some reforms.
It was hoped that this man, who had not grown up in the mountains as a starving peasant like his father, would be more civilized, away from barbarism, away from the system of arbitrary arrest. It was thought that he would bring modernity.
And right from his first days in power, Bashar al-Assad showed concrete signs of opening up the regime. He freed political prisoners and appointed reformist ministers. He was sincere and serious because the whole world was changing. We were in the post-Soviet era and in the post-industrial revolution with new technologies. So he knew that this wave would sweep through Syria, and with it, sooner or later, the democratic wave. Bashar knows he has no choice but to go with the flow of history to retain power. He even welcomed his own political adversaries to the palace, such as the intellectual Arif Dalila, a staunch opponent of his father's regime.
He spoke of his desire to reform and asked what could be done.
Demandé ce qu'on pouvait faire.
These reforms, he said, needed the help of all the major opposition figures.
I often tell clients that we sell more diamonds in a day than your local jeweler sells in a year. The jewelers here are also on a completely different level than jewelers elsewhere. Our competitors are making their rings in China. We're not. But if people really knew, like, our industry, if they knew what went into it, they would never buy at a jewelry store. They would never buy at some of our competitors. I feel strongly about that.
Name's Conrad Harrigan, family man. And if you cross my family, well, you better pray. We don't ask, we take. When someone forgets their place, I've got a man for that.
He told me he understood that the situation was much worse than he had imagined. When we talked together, we spoke clearly, sincerely, and without apprehension.
Sans appréhension.
We were in perfect harmony, agreeing on everything, which suggested that Syria was indeed moving in a new direction.
Une nouvelle direction.
A wind of freedom is beginning to blow across Syria. A period that will soon be known as the Damascus Spring. For the first time in the country's history, freedom of speech was unleashed. Opposition newspapers appeared. Some even published cartoons mocking the military and intelligence services.
There are going to be salons, what have effectively been called democratic forums, where people meet in their homes to discuss politics, which is something absolutely revolutionary.
Opponent Arif Dalila's home is becoming one of the places for debate and reflection that are springing up all over the country. Intellectuals, students, and journalists all gathered there. Journalistes.
The potential of Syrian youth and intellectuals has been held captive for decades.
Ont été captifs pendant des dizaines d'années.
And just as a genie emerges from a lamp, they came out to express themselves freely.
But in early 2002, the Damascus Spring took a turn that Bashar al-Assad had not foreseen. Aref Dalila and 9 other opponents published a manifesto clearly calling for an end to the dictatorship.
We called for freedom, the rule of law, the elimination of security authoritarianism, an end to corruption, and the arrest of those at the head of this corruption.
Et à l'arrestation de ceux qui sont à la tête de cette corruption.
Directly targeted by these attacks, the regime's old guard put pressure on the president.
This power, accustomed for 40 years to not hearing contrary opinions, began to fear that words would become deeds.
Craindre que les paroles ne deviennent des actes. لأن هذا قد يبدأ رأيا ثم يصير فعلا.
I knew that Bashar would have wanted this to continue, but they convinced him and warned him. Careful, don't make a mistake. If you open the door wide, you won't be able to hold back the tongues.
Less than a year after coming to power, Bashar al-Assad has put an abrupt end to his policy of openness.
There's no transition. It's I authorize, finally, I authorize more. End of story. It's a blow to the back of the head, a huge bamboozling blow for all Syrian intellectuals and civil society. Et la société civile syrienne.
On the orders of the president, the security services took action. The 10 intellectuals who had called for an end to the dictatorship were arrested, including Aref Dalila.
I was still asleep when there was a loud knock on the door shouting, "State security, open up!" I quickly put on a pair of pants and a shirt and went to the bathroom where I took my toothbrush and toothpaste. They said, no, you won't need it. You'll be back in a couple of hours. I said, yes, I would need it.
Si, j'en aurais besoin.
They took me down to a dark and very dirty underground cell. And I didn't know how long I'd spend there, since others have stayed there for decades.
Never drink a glass of this homemade Manjaro daily unless you want to lose your pants in just 21 days. I warned you to be careful, didn't I? 1 glass of this 4-ingredient recipe can mimic Manjaro's effects.
After 10 months in prison, Aref Dalila is tried by a military court. He and the other signatories of the manifesto were convicted of undermining state security.
No discussion took place during the trial. No questions were asked. In the 4th session, the president of the court simply pronounced the sentence.
Aref Dalila receives the heaviest sentence, 10 years in prison.
10 ans de prison.
Opposition newspapers and democratic forums were all shut down within a few months.
En quelques mois. Parallèlement,
Bashar al-Assad will nevertheless continue to play the role of reforming president. This was a prerequisite for retaining the support of his Western partners, particularly France.
Celui de la France.
In 2003, 2 emissaries from Jacques Chirac arrived in Damascus. The French president gave them the task of carrying out an audit of the Syrian regime.
He told us, I'd like to help certain leaders in the Middle East, including Bashar. I have conversations with him and Bashar wants to make a real administrative reform. We understand that Chirac had also pushed him in this direction, posing as tutor or godfather to a young leader, whom he also told us he mistrusted all the same.
Bashar al-Assad opens every door for them. The two high-ranking French officials spent 2 weeks investigating the workings of the Syrian state. They met with each minister, then drew up a report proposing drastic reforms.
It's a harsh report in its diagnosis. We show that the administration is not working at all, that the ministries themselves don't work at all. We have indicated that the administration must be honest, and that the system does not guarantee this.
The report points in particular to the role of the intelligence services, which control all the ministries.
We were saying that we found that in the ministries, duplication or tripling of functions, on the one hand by civil servants themselves and on the other by departments, was highly detrimental to effective public action. That's how we turned it.
The report is harsh on the regime, but Bashar al-Assad doesn't seem to mind. On the contrary, he was particularly cooperative with the two French emissaries.
In principle, the reports you write, especially to a great leader, are not really meant to be read. You have an advisor who in a page and a half sums it up for you. In this case, he had read it himself. He had highlighted whole passages. He butchered us for 2 hours, asking pointed questions like an intelligent man. He told us he was glad to have a real diagnosis he could trust, since President Chirac, being a friend of his, had sent us. So he tells us he's very interested and ready to implement much of this report. I believed in his goodwill at the time, yes, frankly.
The Syrian leader seems to accept all the reforms recommended by France, but in reality, nothing will really change in the way the regime operates. The much criticized security services will retain all their influence.
Some of the reforms will be implemented, but they will always come up against obstacles. It's the dark forces of the regime, the security services, that will stand in the way. Basically, the economy is being liberalized, but there is no political liberalization.
But Bashar al-Assad didn't listen to the wise man Jacques Chirac thought he was when he advised him. Le sage que pensait Jacques Chirac quand il le conseillait. He's in the process of taking his country back quite severely. Assez sévère. For Jacques Chirac, it is absolutely essential to do something. Il est absolument indispensable.
Jacques Chirac is extremely disappointed. He realized that Bashar al-Assad was not the reformer he had hoped for, so he decided to act to weaken the Syrian regime. And there's one issue on which he can intervene, Lebanon, the neighboring country that Syrian troops have now occupied for 20 years. High-ranking Syrian dignitaries are making huge profits from this occupation, thanks to a network of corruption and money laundering built up under the reign of Hafez el-Assad. Jacques Chirac, with the support of the United States and the UN, demands the withdrawal of Syrian troops from Lebanon. But Bashar al-Assad had no intention of being dictated to. In Beirut,
I want to buy your house. I can pay you cash for your house no matter what condition it's in. If you need to sell your house for any reason, click the button under the
capital of Lebanon. Tensions are about to escalate. At the beginning of 2005, one man embodies the resistance to Syrian domination of Lebanon. Former Prime Minister Rafi Hariri, a French ally.
Rafi Hariri is a businessman who left Lebanon long ago for Saudi Arabia, where he made his fortune. He went on to become a very, very close friend of Jacques Chirac. So for Rafi Hariri, what mattered was that the Syrian troops left Lebanon.
The businessman lived under heavy protection. In the preceding months, several opponents of the Syrian occupation had been assassinated. Bashar al-Assad had even threatened him personally during a meeting a few months earlier.
Quelques mois plus tôt.
The meeting was extremely brutal. There were even threats and so on. And so, when Rafiq Hariri returned from this visit to Damascus, his Lebanese friends told him to lay low because his safety was in danger.
So that day, Rafiq Hariri had an appointment at the Lebanese parliament. Shortly before 1 p.m., he left a downtown cafe with an imposing security detail.
It's a convoy of 20 cars with phone and signal jammers everywhere.
De téléphones et de signaux partout.
The cars are real hedgehogs. These are ultra-armored cars, especially made in Germany. They weigh as much as a tank. You never know which car he's in. This convoy passes in front of what used to be called the Hotel District, heading for what's known as the Corniche.
A booby-trapped van exploded as his convoy passed. Rafiq Hariri died instantly. The one-ton charge of explosives blew up part of the neighborhood, killing 20 people and injuring more than 100.
The Lebanese immediately point the finger at Syria.
Rafiq Hariri was a close friend of Jacques Chirac. The very next day, the French president arrived in Beirut, welcomed by the family of the deceased.
Jacques Chirac was devastated because he had almost lost his brother. He had lost his advisor. Il a perdu son conseiller.
Jacques Chirac is devastated and above all very angry with Bashar al-Assad. He is convinced that he ordered the attack. He will never forgive him.
Jacques Chirac's suspicions are understandable. Que l'on peut comprendre. Even if nothing could be precisely and legally established, he cut all ties. Il coupe les ponts. His friendship with Rafiq Hariri outweighed his political analysis of Syria at the start of his term. L'emporte sur l'analyse politique qu'il avait faite de la Syrie au début de son mandat. It was time for a break and for Jacques Chirac a clean break. Chirac, une rupture sans appel.
And for France, it just means a sudden clean break in relations with Syria.
Net et sans bavure des relations avec la Syrie.
If Bashar al-Assad is indeed the instigator of this attack, he has made a very bad calculation. 10 days after Rafiq Hariri's death, 1 million people, a quarter of the Lebanese population, marched in Beirut to demand the withdrawal of Syrian troops. Syria is in the UN's crosshairs. Its president could even appear before an international tribunal. Bashar al-Assad was forced to give in. He ordered his army to withdraw. His troops left Lebanon a month later.
It was a humiliation and a failure. Bashar has suffered a real setback, but in every respect.
After Hariri's death, yes, Bashar al-Assad went through a difficult period. Syria was isolated.
Now considered a pariah on the international stage, the Syrian president could find himself weakened in his own country. But he is not giving up.
Bashar al-Assad will react in a mountain Alawiya. Montagnard, we hunker down under the storm. We have the power to cause trouble. We're going to use it. We'll gamble on time. And we'll survive.
And to survive, Bashar al-Assad will rely on those he trusts the most, the members of his family. Every Friday, the president dines with his siblings at his mother's home, chez sa mère. Since Bashar's election, they have become the most influential figures in the country.
Thank you all for joining the Oprah Podcast and for watching us on YouTube. I appreciate you taking the time to spend it here with me, and I'm just so appreciative of the conversations we're having.
Maher, his younger brother, who is the boss of the 4th Division, the armored unit responsible for guarding Damascus. He is a violent character who, for example, shot his brother-in-law in 1998. Tiré sur son beau-frère dans les années 1998. And then there's Bashar's sister, Bushra, who married Asef Chowkad, head of military intelligence, qui est patron des services de renseignement militaire, a powerful figure in the security galaxy.
Together, they will help Bashar al-Assad eliminate all his potential enemies.
Vice President Qaddam was ousted at that time. Then followed one exclusion operation after another.
Secret police agents would question any employee who arrived late for work. It was terrible. There were days when they were able to arrest 200 people from a single department.
All these operations led to the definitive liquidation of Bashar al-Assad's opponents. Des adversaires de Bashar al-Assad.
2 years after the Lebanese crisis, helped by his clan, Bashar al-Assad became a dictator as feared as his father.
They began to sense in 2007 that Bashar had become very proud. I sensed that he had changed. He was no longer talking about reform projects. He was no longer talking about the modernization project he had announced when we started work. He was no longer embarrassed by the behavior of the security services. Even the government felt hostage. He's on the dash. The security services were in charge. People couldn't take it anymore.
For the president is not content to simply wield undivided power. He has also seized control of the country's entire economy. In the 2000s, Rami Makhlouf, a cousin of Bashar al-Assad, became the richest man in Syria. From telephony to construction, he controls the main sectors of the economy, redistributing profits to the entire Assad clan.
All telephone operators are theirs, whatever the brand. As a result, cell phone prices and subscriptions are higher than in neighboring countries.
Damascus shopkeepers say that Rami Makhlouf doesn't even leave crumbs for the Syrian bourgeoisie, particularly in Damascus and Aleppo, who used to live on state tenders.
Hafez al-Assad was a dictator and a despot, and wages were very low. But the electricity bills were so low we didn't even talk about it. With Bashar, on the other hand, I had bills equivalent to half my salary. Bashar arrived with a new form of tyranny, that of theft and capitalism. So it turned out that this man was even worse than his father.
Do you have a car? Do you have a clean driving record? Did you know that you could pay as low as $39 a month in car?
Bashar al-Assad manages to keep control of the country. All that remained was to restore his image on the international stage. In 2007, the UN investigation into Rafi Hariri's death stalled. For the moment, no formal proof has been produced. Even though all the evidence points to Damascus, proceedings against the Syrian dictator have been suspended. If Jacques Chirac will never forgive him. Everything changed in 2007 with the arrival of the new president, Nicolas Sarkozy. He set himself apart from his predecessor and sought to renew the thread of dialogue with Syria. For Bashar al-Assad, Nicolas Sarkozy's arrival at the Élysée Palace was an opportunity to be seized. He tried to re-establish dialogue with Paris. Avec Paris.
Shortly after Nicolas Sarkozy's arrival at the Élysée Palace, we were contacted by Bashar al-Assad's Minister of Foreign Affairs, who suggested that we re-establish ties between us.
Nicolas Sarkozy also sees an opportunity to make a name for himself on the international stage by going against the grain of his predecessor.
France is a great power, and France has a special voice in this part of the world. Une parole particulière dans cette région du monde. And since Syria is holding out its hand, saying that we want to return to the concert of nations, it's our diplomatic duty to say, go for it, we're going to try. Nicolas Sarkozy's starting point was a realistic one. Well, either we have proof that Bashar al-Assad ordered the assassination of Rafi Hariri and we condemn it, etc., etc., etc. If we don't have proof, we can't continue to marginalize Syria. La Syrie,
in a sign of openness, Claude Guéant was sent to Damascus to meet Bashar al-Assad. After years of tension between France and Syria, he had no idea what kind of welcome he would receive.
we saw him in a grey building in the city, the street blocked by tanks. It was a very, very unsettled atmosphere. What I noticed that day was that he's a character who's very rigid in his way of being, in his way of speaking. He doesn't want to give the impression that he's giving in. That seems to me to be a very important part of his psychology. Bashar al-Assad's initial comments are encouraging, however. He confirms his desire to re-engage with the rest of the world. He promises to liberalize his regime to make progress towards greater freedom, more freedom for the press, for people's expression,
The interview went well, but on leaving the room, Claude Guéant realized that the Syrian president was trying to send him one last message.
A door was open, obviously left open on purpose, behind which people were working on devices that were obviously recording the conversations we were to have. To say it was a bit off-putting. It wasn't a very proper introduction or even very acceptable. But it was the message that this regime existed, that it had its strength.
Despite this tension, Nicolas Sarkozy played the game of reconciliation. In 2008, he invited Bashar al-Assad to Paris during the July 14th festivities.
It was the definitive victory, the crowning and absolution of Bashar al-Assad at the hands of the West.
You've clearly understood that we're embarking on a new relationship. Not for a few days, not for a few weeks. Structural, strategic relations.
Nicolas Sarkozy immediately set the rules of the game. He took Syria and Bashar with a grain of salt, if I may say so. I've never forgotten President Sarkozy's advice. If he goes off the rails, we put him back in the shadows.
The Syrian president was not the only Arab world leader invited by Nicolas Sarkozy that day. But he is the only one who will be remembered.
Bashar al-Assad, on the other hand, arrives in his tall, visibly fit state. And indeed not the hero of the party, but the personality who physically and politically stands out. Physiquement et politiquement se remarque.
For us, it was proof that all the Western talk of corruption, sur la corruption, the values in human rights are nothing but a sham. And that in truth, Westerners are just pragmatic people defending their interests.
Have you ever seen the magic glasses that can see clearly without glasses? These glasses can not only see far away, but also see near. This Smart Zoom glasses from Japan.
From that moment on, he went a little crazy too, because he thought he was a bit like the king of the world. Il s'est cru être un peu. But in any case, he said to himself, you can imagine 3 years earlier we were threatening him with the International Criminal Court. And now he's parading on the Champs-Élysées.
Bashar al-Assad took advantage of this rehabilitation to improve his image in Western eyes.
Auprès de l'opinion occidentale.
A few months later, he received a French television crew in Damascus.
Une équipe de télévision française.
The Syrian president had become an expert in the media game.
Affable, friendly, open, ready to answer any question. Prêt à répondre à toutes les questions.
Today, a number of Western countries see you as a conservative, a defender of an authoritarian system. So I'd like to ask you a very simple question. Who is the real Bashar al-Assad, the reformer or the conservative?
This is a very important question. It's always a question of terminology. You can be a reformer. You can be both a conservative and a reformer. It's the same thing with the economy. We open up our economy but regulate with regulation, not without regulation. That's how I see it. Conservative and reformer.
Still, I have the impression that he has acquired some response mechanisms. He's used to it. He knows the business. He knows how to answer questions that he considers a little hard, difficult, or insidious. And so he became a professional. I wouldn't call it lying. But overall, I think he was there to show that perhaps Syria can be seen differently.
As a token of modernity and to show that all is well in his country, Bashar al-Assad puts journalists in his own car and invites them to the theater.
When I go to work at the palace, I always drive myself. I only drive myself.
But it's not very safe.
No. Syria is a very safe country. No shielding, we can open the window.
Take it. Open your window?
Yes. There's no risk. You can't be safe with bodyguards. You're safe if you have a safe company.
It's all a big show to show that things are changing in Syria. There's a young president, and my wife and I can move around freely. Look, we don't even have security around us. We just go. I think the security was behind us. They follow at a distance anyway. You can't see them, but they're following at a distance. The gun carriers are at a distance. That's clear.
Arriving at the Damascus theater, the president mingles with the audience. He wanted to show off his popularity to French journalists.
Everyone was mingling, coming up to us, talking to us. Bashar, I've known him since he was young. He was brilliant, a good guy and all. naturally people would come up to us and tell us calculated truths. I say to myself, they fine-tuned their position, fine-tuned their communication.
Bashar al-Assad has one charming asset at his disposal in his bid to win over the West, his wife, Asma. She is the perfect embodiment of the modern image her husband wants to project.
She's a Westerner, in fact. She's of Syrian origin, of course. She is Syrian. But she was brought up in England. She's a banker. She's beautiful, very beautiful. And belle, très belle.
I believe this is going to change your life. Yeah, that simple circle is a cell. Look, I believe this in my heart because this is exactly what happened to me. I was questioning, do I have a thyroid problem? And that's why I have no energy.
She's an excellent marketing element for Bashar. She sells her husband. At her husband's side, she's learned to be very manipulative in what she says. She'll put her hand on your back and say, but you know my husband likes you. We see things differently. There's the past, now there's the future. We want to embody this new generation in power.
Just 3 years after being banished from the international stage, Bashar al-Assad is once again welcomed with open arms in the West. But in 2011, the explosion of the Arab Spring and the bloody repression carried out by the Syrian president will once again show the true nature of this regime. Within months, the revolt turned into civil war. The rebellion began to arm itself with the creation of the Free Syrian Army, which stood up to the regular army. For Bashar al-Assad, the situation was bogged down, but the dictator persisted. And to hold on to power, he will use unlimited violence. In February 2012, Bashar al-Assad's army massively bombed Homs, Syria's third largest city. In recent months, the city has become the epicenter of the insurgency. The Free Syrian Army occupied several districts of the city. Hundreds of civilians were killed. It was the bloodiest offensive since the beginning of the conflict.
Stunned, we discovered that Bashar al-Assad was a mass murderer, whereas we had thought he was just a dictator. Alors qu'on pensait que c'était juste un dictateur.
A month later, the dictator appeared in one of the districts retaken from the rebels. No matter how many people died, Bashar al-Assad was ready to do anything to stay at the head of the country.
I won't give in, I won't hold out. This kind of murderous blindness, he has made a trademark of it, and a mark of his own personality. Une marque de fabrique et une marque de sa propre personnalité.
I and all the Syrian people know that you young people who go to war are not afraid of death.
He considers himself,
he sees himself as different from anyone else.
say that's right,
And he thinks that everything he says is true. Because some of the Syrian people are rising up against him, he considers that they are infidels and that he has the right to kill them. That's why he's indifferent to their fate. He doesn't care about the ever-increasing death toll. He sleeps soundly.
as any regular person.
At this time, the Syrian president seems out of touch with the horror his country is plunged into. When he exchanged emails with his wife, he ironized the demands of his opponents. a series of messages intercepted by the rebels, we discover that Asma el-Assad spends fortunes buying luxury goods on the internet. Despite the thousands of deaths, the presidential couple continue to live as if nothing had happened.
It describes her character that Asma el-Assad continues to be supplied with Vuitton, Louboutin, and other French and foreign luxury brands, shoes, and clothing. Françaises et étrangères, chaussures et vêtements d'hiver. Obviously, this is shocking.
But in the eyes of the world, Bashar al-Assad can no longer be trusted. And within the international community, certain powers are beginning to contemplate military intervention to topple him.
Pour le renverser. Initially, we thought, and when I say we, I don't just mean the French, the Americans, or the Russians. We thought that, well, he was going to, how should I put it, get the hell out.
In 2012, François Hollande was elected president. One of the first acts of the new occupant of the Élysée Palace will be to send arms to the Syrian opposition.
Do this 7 minutes a day until May 1st. We start on Monday, April 7th. In a week, you'll feel better. In 2 weeks, you'll look better. In a month, your wife won't believe your results. Here's a personalized plan of short chair workouts tailored for beginners over 50. It's just 7 minutes a day, beginner friendly, and requires no equipment. You can work out anytime, anywhere. Just open the app and follow along.
We were pushing the forces that, at the time, were quite powerful, democratic, that wanted there to be a diverse Syria, diverse.
But this democratic opposition is going to be overwhelmed on the ground. A new force has entered the Syrian war, the Islamist militias. Paramilitary groups that have always opposed Bashar al-Assad's Alawite clan and recruit from the country's Sunni population.
There were Islamist opponents who wanted to take revenge on a power that had repressed them.
These militias were financed by Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, opportunistic neighbors who wanted to take advantage of the prevailing chaos to extend their influence in the region.
Money and weapons quickly flowed to the Islamists.
Syria became the rendezvous of the international jihad. The training camps were set up.
In barely a year, militias became the main opposition force. Some, under the banner of Al-Qaeda, are already at the gates of Damascus. Others claim to belong to the Islamic State. A new jihadist group born in Iraq is beginning to wreak havoc in the rest of the country.
Our goal is the conquest of Somalia. With your sincerity and submission to Almighty God, we will crush our adversaries under 1,000 cannons.
A growing threat that Bashar al-Assad knows how to use to his advantage. Since the start of the insurrection, he has ordered the release of dozens of jihadist detainees who have swelled the ranks of the militia.
He does something incredible. He says to some, you opponents, go back to prison. And to others, a lot of thugs, criminals, and a few hardline, radicalized Islamists, you get out of prison. Vous sortez de prison.
As it turned out, he freed a whole series of people who largely fed the leaders of the jihadist movements.
The rise of the Islamists will serve as a pretext for Bashar al-Assad to continue his bloody repression. He can now present himself as a bulwark against terrorism.
The international and regional powers involved must stop arming and harboring terrorist groups.
Syria has found an enemy. This isn't a revolution, it's terrorism. That's Bashar's logic, and he doesn't give a damn. He forgets to mention that it was he who freed some of them. C'est lui qui a, that he's the one who provided everything necessary for terrorism to take hold. But then, it's no longer Bashar al-Assad who oppresses his revolutionary people. It's Bashar al-Assad who saves his people from terrorism. Al-Assad qui sauve son peuple du terrorisme.
No one in Paris is fooled. Under the guise of fighting terrorism, it is indeed the Syrian democratic opposition that Bashar al-Assad is destroying. Francois Hollande and his military staff were preparing a military intervention against the Syrian president. France would act as part of an American-led coalition.
We're preparing the plans, the Americans, the British, the French, and this Arab country or that. Who's going to do it? Who's going to attack in such and such a way?
But the threat of a Western attack does not frighten Bashar al-Assad. Quite the contrary, in fact. On August 21st, the horror went one step further. A sarin gas bombing on the outskirts of Damascus killed more than 320 civilians. The use of chemical weapons was one of the limits set by the international community, and in particular by U.S. President Barack Obama.
Rapid investigations have established that it is unquestionably the regime. At the same time, we have prepared a number of things, but the plans are becoming clear. And what are the plans? Plans for an attack on Bashar, not personally, individually. Bashar, non pas. Personnellement, également. To make him understand that he can't do it again with chemical weapons, that he absolutely must negotiate.
This incredible mold remover gel can restore your bathroom and tiles to their original shine in just 15 minutes. This incredible product eliminates stubborn mold and mildew in seconds without any scrubbing. Take any moldy surface, apply the gel directly, and watch the mold literally dissolve before your eyes. Its patented NanoNet technology penetrates deep into even the toughest black mold, breaking it down at its root. It also leaves behind an invisible protective barrier to prevent future mold growth, keeping surfaces looking brand new without painful scrubbing or harmful toxic chemicals. It was invented by a renowned but frustrated chemist dealing with a universal problem: mold that just wouldn't budge. His shower and bathroom tiles were covered in stubborn black mold, and he refused to spend hours scrubbing with little to no success. Why should we still rely on outdated, time-consuming cleaning methods? So, he put his chemistry expertise to work and developed a revolutionary solution. Mold Remover Gel is a powerful cleaning innovation that targets and destroys mold and mildew without the need for scrubbing. Each tube contains a concentrated gel formula that adheres to vertical surfaces like tiles and walls, making it ideal for hard-to-reach or tricky areas. The gel uses all natural, non-toxic ingredients that are safe for your family and won't irritate skin, damage surfaces, or release harmful fumes, unlike many name-brand cleaners with harsh chemicals. That's why Mold Remover Gel is safe to use throughout your home, from bathrooms and kitchens to basements, and anywhere else mold tends to grow, because no one should have to put their health at risk to keep their home clean. Once the chemist saw how well it worked, he started selling it online. At first, it spread solely through word of mouth. What he didn't anticipate was the viral response on social media, with thousands of users sharing their jaw-dropping before and after results using Mold Remover Gel. Since its launch last year, Mold Remover Gel has sold over 1 million units worldwide. Homeowners, landlords, and even cleaning professionals have all made the switch. And now, through this exclusive promotion, you can claim a discount of up to 70%. To ensure authenticity and protect against counterfeits, Mold remover gel is not sold on Amazon or in major retailers. It is only available through this special online offer for a limited time. The founder is so confident in the effectiveness of mold remover gel that he offers a 30-day money-back guarantee. If it doesn't perform as promised, you'll receive a full...
The coalition forces are about to intervene in Syria. But President Hollande received a phone call from the White House that changed everything.
At the end of the afternoon, Obama called Francois Hollande. I was there, and President Obama begins with general considerations. Then he gets down to business. And even if he doesn't say he's flip-flopped, no, he says, but it's more complicated. He says, but it's more complicated than I thought, and I want to give myself a little time, etc. Well, it's quite clear that he's given up. Obviously, this kills the operation since it was supposed to be a concerted effort. There was no question of us doing it alone. Obama didn't confirm the strike because he thought, as if the regime collapsed, there might be Democrats for a while, but that in the end, they would be swept away by the Islamists.
This American about-face will allow another great power to take the upper hand. Vladimir Putin's Russia. Russia has been a staunch ally of Syria since the 1970s. Along with Iran, it is the only country to have supported Bashar al-Assad since the start of the civil war.
Mr. Putin is a very tough man, but at the same time very intelligent. He understands that Obama's failure to intervene, despite his commitment to do so, means that the Russians can move forward.
The Russian president then tried his hand at diplomatic poker. If the main problem is chemical weapons, he may have a solution that does not require military intervention against Bashar al-Assad.
Then Vladimir Putin took Bashar al-Assad by the scruff of the neck and told him, you're going to liquidate your chemical arsenal, so you're going to come out on top.
A month later, the Russian president's plan was presented to the UN. The Syrian president did indeed undertake to destroy his chemical arsenal. The Western coalition, which had already renounced military intervention, had no choice but to accept it.
Feeling the Americans have realized that it may also be in their interest to move in this direction.
In favor of the resolution, please raise your hand.
The resolution was adopted unanimously. Russia made a comeback on the international scene, and Vladimir Putin established himself as the new arbiter of the Syrian conflict.
Given the failure of American, French, and high-level policy in Syria, the West is now out of the picture. In fact, we no longer hold any cards. It's all up to the Russians, and to some extent the Iranians.
But the big winner in this crisis exit is Bashar al-Assad. 8 months later, one of Syria's longest-serving presidents begins his third term in office.
I swear before God to respect the country's constitution, its laws, and its republican system.
Do you have a car? Do you have a clean driving record? Did you know you can pay as low as $39 a month in car insurance? How might you ask? It's super easy. Click below, enter a zip code, tell us basic information, and you'll have the cheapest car insurance quote in less than 60 seconds.
It's a ceremony in disguise because after 3 years of civil war, he's no longer really in charge of Syria. The Russians and Iranians hold the regime at arm's length, and on all fronts, the Islamist threat continues to advance. By the end of summer 2015, Bashar al-Assad no longer controlled more than a third of his country. Daesh is at the height of its power and has made Raqqa in the north the capital of its caliphate. Even the Assad family's home region, a stronghold once considered impregnable, is surrounded by jihadists.
Latakia, the capital of the Alawite country, is under clear threat from the rebels up on who could come down and wreak havoc. Even Damascus is under threat.
Bashar al-Assad owes his survival solely to the massive bombardment by the Russian army and the fighters on the ground, financed by Iran, which protects him from the Syrian rebels.
He can no longer exercise his power because foreign forces far more powerful than he are present in Syria. Nor can he profit from his money. He has lost everything. And his name will go down in history as the man who destroyed Syria.
Bashar al-Assad has been locked up in his presidential palace for months and is now nothing more than a phantom president at the head of a country in ruins. Entire towns have been razed to the ground. Between 300 and 400,000 Syrians have died, and 6 million people, a quarter of the population, have fled into exile.
Never in their history, and Damascus is the world's oldest capital, have Syrians had to face such a situation. That's just true.
In April 2017, a new chemical weapons bombing attributed to the Syrian regime killed at least 87 people and injured hundreds more in the rebel town of Khan Sheikhoun. In retaliation,
Heavy.